January 1st, 1708. The Karelian Royal Army, under King Charles XII, has begun its fated crossing over the Vistula. The Tsardom of Russia had proven to be far too great a thorn to ignore. And no matter how long this campaign would take, Carolus Rex would ensure that said thorn was taken care of permanently. However, things would not go as he intended. For shortly after the crossing began, an unusually intense snowstorm began to hamper their path, as if Mother Nature herself conspired against them. But the king and his army would not be so easily deterred. They would press forward. They would persevere. And just as quickly as the storm came, it dissipated. However, they were greeted by a disturbing sight. Where they had expected to find verdant forests or lush plains of grassland, they instead found a near desolate, rocky landscape, dotted only with crystals of various color and sparse vegetation. This was not Russia, nor were they even in Europe anymore. Welcome back, my students, to another lecture on the colliding worlds. Today, we shall begin coverage of the Karelians' long march home and the subsequent conflicts which accompanied it. I am aware I said that I would originally cover the Iron Wars in full. However, rest assured, they are part of the Long March, and due to the amount of content that this will result in, I felt it would be best to split it up into a series of lectures. So, without further ado, let us cover the first part in this new series, the Karelians' initial foray into the battleground world of Sigmund V, and the subsequent first contact with a hostile faction. Despite the initial confusion and chaos, the next couple weeks would go on without much hassle. A small blessing, but in the eyes of King Charles, a blessing nonetheless, as we can see in his personal memoirs. Why has God sent us here? To this forsaken place? Have we failed him? Have we angered him? Is this some kind of test? Or is this the work of the devil? It would only make sense. For who else would create a realm of endless battle? For in the past 3 days alone, my scouts have reported 17 different ongoing battles, each with a vast array of different armies fighting each other. Nevertheless, there are so many questions that still plague my mind. But I cannot show it. For if the men were to see that I too am lost in this place, they would fall into despair. We already have so many problems to deal with, so it is quite fortunate that none of these other players have seen fit to do battle with us. Unfortunately for the entire army, at the time of writing that entry, that state of affairs was about to come to an end. Of all the possible outcomes that could happen this day, of all the possible armies they could have met the Caroleans' first hostile contact was arguably one of the most ridiculous. For when the zealots of the proclaimed Banana Brigade demanded their surrender and that they embrace the faith of the Potassium One, Major Haneth Kerrison and his men could only laugh at the sheer absurdity. This action serving to draw ire from the brigade, who drew their weapons and charged with an unbreakable zeal. Though they were amused by the previous display, the Carolean response was swift and disciplined, as 3 volleys of 25 muskets rang out into the night, slaughtering dozens of cultists before drawing their swords, readying for the charge. A row of pikes ready themselves to meet the enemy, just in time for several to impale themselves as the 2 lines clashed. The battle raged for an hour. Blades clashed together, screams of agony echoed out, and the ground beneath the 2 forces became slick with blood. The Caroleans held on with the discipline they were famous for. But there was something about this new enemy that unsettled them. The enemies they fought before, from Russia to Norway to Denmark and Poland, they always broke in the end. But these cultists did not. In fact, many of them continued to fight on with a terrifying ferocity, despite being run through in several different places. What in God's name were these things? And so, to the surprise of many, it would be the Caroleans that would ultimately flee the battlefield. However, this one defeat would not be the end. This would only be the beginning of a much larger war. One which King Charles himself would ensure Sweden would be ready for. And with that, I conclude this week's lecture. If you have stayed to the end, thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoy this kind of content, do be sure to leave a like, a comment for the algorithm. Seriously, any help in that regard will be appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe. Next week, we shall be returning to the world of Chronotia, as I cover one of the divine beings of the realm. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.